Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Understanding Qurbani. Stories from the Quran and Hadiths about Qurbani. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Holy Sacrifice, the intentions and sincerity in Qurbani. In our previous episode, the life and times of our noble Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. During the lifetime of Prophet Ibrahim, many Qurbans had taken place to many different deities, but one of the most known and important sacrifices was to Allah, with the Qurban being Prophet Ibrahim's son, Ismail. Prophet Ibrahim was born in Babylon, in the ancient city of Ur of the Chaldees, in present-day Iraq, and at a young age he was very conscious of the reality of life and the worshipping of deities. Prophet Ibrahim's guardian used to make idols, which people worshipped and made sacrifices to. Allah mentions about this conversation in his Quran, when Prophet Ibrahim addresses his guardian. The mindset of Prophet Ibrahim's people were convinced that their ideology and methodology was correct, to the point that they said, "Are you presenting the truth before us, or just playing with us?" They were sure of the truth, and in their understanding that they could never imagine that anyone could be serious in declaring it to be false. Prophet Ibrahim made an oath saying that in their absence he will break their idols. On a particular day of festivities, when all the people would go out and celebrate, Prophet Ibrahim was invited, but he refused to go, saying he was unwell, that he was sick. So the people left him behind, thinking that he was unwell, and they made their way to the festival. The streets leading to the temple that housed the idols were empty, and the temple itself was deserted, as the priests had also gone to the festival outside the city. Prophet Ibrahim went there, carrying a sharp axe. He looked at the stone and wood statues of the gods, and at the food laid in front of them as offerings. Prophet Ibrahim asked all the statues around him, "Will you not eat of the offerings before you? What is the matter with you that do not speak?" Prophet Ibrahim immediately raised the axe in his hand and began to destroy the false gods that were worshipped by people. Prophet Ibrahim destroyed them all except the biggest one. He hung the axe on his shoulder as if to say this statue had destroyed the other statues. After destroying the false gods, he felt at peace and left the temple. He had fulfilled his vow to show his people a practical proof of their foolishness in worshipping something other than Allah. By leaving the axe on the shoulder of the untouched deity, he wanted to prove to the people the error of their ways. When the people came back and noticed that all the idols but one had been destroyed, they said,
قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا إنه لمن الظالمين قالوا سمعنا فتى يذكرهم يقال له إبراهيم قالوا فأتوا به على أعين الناس لعلهم يشهدون قالوا أأنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا فاسألوهم إن كانوا ينطقون فرجعوا إلى أنفسهم فقالوا إنكم أنتم الظالمون ثم نكسوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون
"Who has done this to our gods? Surely he is one of the wrongdoers." Some of them said, "We heard a youth called Ibrahim speak ill of them." The others said, "Bring him then before the eyes of the people, that they may see what will be done to him." On Ibrahim's arrival, they said, "Ibrahim, are you he who has done this to our gods?" He answered, "Rather, it was this Supreme One who has done it. So ask them, if they can speak." Thereupon, they turned to their inner selves and said to themselves, "Surely it is you who are the wrongdoers," meaning they know that they themselves were in the wrong, but they thought this among themselves rather than say it out loud. While their minds were lost in confusion, they said, "You know well that they do not speak." Prophet Ibrahim said, "Do you, then, worship beside Allah a thing that can neither benefit you nor hurt you? Fie upon you and upon all that you worship beside Allah. Do you have no sense?" Prophet Ibrahim said, "Actually, the big statue has done it. Then ask the idols, if they can speak." The people said, "Who should we ask?" Prophet Ibrahim replied, "Ask your God." They said, "Do you not know that they are not talking?" Prophet Ibrahim replied, "Why do you then worship something that cannot speak, something that cannot afford the benefits, and something that cannot harm you? Do you not want to think for a moment where your minds are? Your gods have been destroyed, while the greatest God stands up. Just look at it. These gods are not able to avoid the destruction of themselves. So then, how can they bring any good to you? Do you not want to think for a moment? The axe is on the shoulder of the greatest God, but strangely he cannot tell you what happened. He cannot speak, hear, move, see, or benefit, and does not harm anything. He's just a stone. Then why do people worship stones?" When they considered the answer of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, they realized that they themselves were in the wrong, because they had set up helpless idols as deities, which could not even speak a word as to who had broken them. But soon after this, they were overpowered by obduracy and ignorance, which perverted their minds, and they again relapsed into crookedness and misguidance. They could not argue with the facts Prophet Ibrahim presented to them, so they resorted to violence and oppression. Their arrogance would not allow them to admit their foolishness. All they could do was to use their power of authority to punish Prophet Ibrahim. They kept him in chains and planned their revenge. They said,
قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين.
"Burn him and come to the support of your gods, if you are going to do anything." The idolaters did not want their people to worship anything other than idols, so they came together to find a suitable punishment and make an example out of Prophet Ibrahim. The community decided to throw Prophet Ibrahim into the biggest fire they could build, with the intent of burning him alive. All the people from the community were ordered to gather wood for the fire as a service to their gods. For several days, they collected the firewood. They dug a deep pit, filled it with firewood, and ignited it. Then they brought a catapult to cast Prophet Ibrahim into the fire. They tied his hands and feet with ropes, and then put him on the catapult. The fire was ready and very hot. Its flames were reaching the sky. The people had to stand away from the pit of fire because of the great heat. Then the chief priest gave his order to cast Prophet Ibrahim into the fire. The angel Gabriel came near Prophet Ibrahim's head and asked him, "O Ibrahim, do you wish for anything?" Ibrahim replied, "Nothing from you." The catapult was shot, and Prophet Ibrahim was cast into the fire. But his descent into the blaze was as a descent on steps in a cool garden. The flames were still there, but they did not burn Prophet Ibrahim, as Allah issued his command,
قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم.
"O fire, become coolness and safety for Ibrahim." The fire was obedient to the command of Allah until it became cool and brought salvation to Prophet Ibrahim. The fire only burned the ropes that bounded Prophet Ibrahim. He was calm in the middle of the fire, as if he were sitting in the middle of a peaceful garden. He praised Allah and glorified Him. The only heat he felt was the love for his beloved Allah. Prophet Ibrahim's heart was not filled with fear, regret, or lamentation. The only thing in his heart was just love for Allah. The fire was peaceful and cool. Indeed, those who love and obey Allah will not feel frightened of death. Rather, they will be brave and seek Allah's pleasure and mercy. The people, the chiefs and the priests, were watching the fire from a distance, as this huge fire was burning their faces and nearly suffocated them. It kept burning for such a long time that the disbelievers thought it would never be extinguished. When it did burn out, they were very greatly amazed to find Prophet Ibrahim coming out of the pit untouched by the fire. Their faces were dark from the smoke, but Ibrahim's face was bright with the light and grace of Allah. The raging fire had become cool for Prophet Ibrahim and had only charred the ropes which bounded him, and as he walked out of the fire, as if he was walking out of a garden in peace and contentment, the unbelievers shouted in astonishment as they felt defeated by Prophet Ibrahim. Allah says about this in His Quran,
وَأَرَادُوا بِهِ كَيْدًا فَجَعَلْنَاهُمُ الْأَخْسَرِينَ.
They had sought to do evil to him, but we caused them to be the worst losers. This miracle shamed the tyrants, but it did not cool the flame of anger in their hearts. However, after this event, many of the people believed in Prophet Ibrahim's preaching of oneness of Allah, although they kept their belief a secret for fear of harm or death at the hands of the rulers and their people. Prophet Ibrahim had established a definite reasoning against the idolaters. Nothing was left to prove for him except to reason against the rulers who proclaimed themselves gods and were oppressing the people. Prophet Ibrahim went to visit and in some cases was summoned to speak with some of the rulers. The Quran discusses a certain conversation between an unrighteous ruler and Prophet Ibrahim. Many historical sources suggest that it was Nimrod. Nimrod was one of the rulers who became extremely arrogant due to his wealth and power, to the point that he made the claim that he possessed the power of creation and claimed divinity for himself. Nimrod proclaimed himself as a living god and was worshipped as such by his subjects. Nimrod, king of Babylon, the ruler of the land of Prophet Ibrahim's birth, which is modern-day Iraq, felt that his throne was in danger and that he was losing power because upon witnessing Prophet Ibrahim coming out of the fire unharmed, some of his people started believing in Allah and Ibrahim being a true prophet of Allah. Nimrod wanted to debate with Prophet Ibrahim to show his people that he, the king, is indeed a god, and that Prophet Ibrahim was a liar. He feared that the status of godhead he had proclaimed for himself was challenged by an ordinary human being. Prophet Ibrahim asserted that he acknowledged that nobody else but the creator of the universe is his God, the only object worthy of his worship. He also denied categorically the godhead and overlordship of anyone else. This raised the question of how far the new creed could be tolerated, as it opposed the beliefs of the national religion and rejected the current ideas regarding the deities it worshipped. It also alerted the establishment that maybe Prophet Ibrahim's ideas might constitute a serious threat to the national state and to the position and privilege of its ruling class or coterie. During the conversation with King Nimrod and Prophet Ibrahim, the understanding was clear from Prophet Ibrahim's very first statement that none other than God could legitimately be regarded as the Lord. Prophet Ibrahim said, "It is Allah who gives life and the one who takes it away. Can you do that?" Nimrod resorted to an unreasonable reply, saying, "Yes, I can give life and I can take it away." Nimrod then called 2 men from jail, who were brought forward. He commanded his soldiers to execute one of them, and he told the second one that he was free. He then said, "See, I took away the life of this one, and I gave life to the other one. Prophet Ibrahim did not mean this definition of giving life and death. He meant the miracle of life and the creation of human beings and every living creature. Prophet Ibrahim's second statement left no room even for Nimrod's brazenness. Prophet Ibrahim said, Allah brings the sun from the east. You, then, bring it from the west. Nimrod knew well enough that the sun and the moon were subjected to the overlordship of the same God, which Prophet Ibrahim had acknowledged as his Lord. What, then, could he say in reply? To accept the truth which Prophet Ibrahim had made crystal clear by his argument meant that Nimrod ought to part with his absolutist dictatorship. The evil within him was not prepared for that, hence he was left wonderstruck, unable to get out of the darkness of self-adoration to the light of truth. Allah has mentioned this meeting between Prophet Ibrahim and Nimrod, saying,
ألم تر إلى الذي حاج إبراهيم في ربه أن آتاه الله الملك إذ قال إبراهيم ربي الذي يحيي ويميت قال أنا أحيي وأميت قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأت بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين.
Have you not thought about him who disputed with Ibrahim about his Lord because Allah had given him the kingdom? When Ibrahim said to him, My Lord Allah is he who gives life and causes death. He said, I give life and cause death. Ibrahim said, Verily, Allah causes the sun to rise from the east, then cause it you to rise from the west. So the disbeliever was utterly defeated. Allah guides not the people who are the wrongdoers. We can learn some very important lessons from Prophet Ibrahim's experience with King Nimrod, and we can compare it to the times we are living in today. For example, all polytheistic societies from the earliest times till today share one characteristic. They acknowledge God to be the Lord of Lords, the greatest of all deities. They are unwilling to acknowledge him, however, as the only God, the only object of man's worship and service. Prophet Ibrahim was concerned about his people, as every messenger would be, and he approached and dealt with the king in a mild and respectful way. The king Nimrod did not know what to say and what to do, as he could not argue against the facts. After Nimrod was silenced, Prophet Ibrahim left the royal palace. The truth of Prophet Ibrahim spread throughout the land. People were starting to talk about his miracle, his salvation from the fire, and his arguments with the king that made the king speechless. Every messenger from Allah came with a message of laws for mankind to abide by, and every prophet sent by Allah came to help enforce the message. So every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. Prophet Ibrahim is a messenger, and the laws or books he was given are called the Scrolls of Ibrahim. There is a hadith from our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that mentions the scrolls of Prophet Ibrahim, which has been narrated from Abu Dar, who said, I said, O Messenger of Allah, what were the scrolls of Ibrahim? He said, they were parables. O King, who has been entrusted with authority, and who has been tested with that authority, and who has been deluded by that authority, I did not send you to this world to amass the fortunes of it. Rather, I sent you to avert from me the call of the oppressed, for I do not reject the call of the oppressed, even if it comes from a disbeliever. Allah mentions this in his Quran, saying,
وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى قَالَ أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ قَالَ بَلَى وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي قال فخذ أربعة من الطير فصرهن إليك ثم اجعل على كل جبل منهن جزءا ثم ادعهن يأتينك سعيا واعلم أن الله عزيز حكيم.
And recall when Ibrahim said, "My Lord, show me how you give life to the dead." Allah said, "Why? Do you have no faith?" Ibrahim replied, "Yes, but in order that my heart be at rest," he said, "Then take 4 birds and tame them to yourself. Then put a part of them on every hill and summon them. They will come to you flying. Know well that Allah is Almighty, All-Wise." We will learn about the sons of Prophet Ibrahim, each being the father of great nations, and we will learn about the great Qurban. Join us on the next episode of the Holy Sacrifice, where we will continue with the journey of Prophet Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.